So now it's time to introduce our very first opening keynote speaker, and he is quite a personality. He is a professor of innovation and strategy at IMD. He holds the Cisco chair in digital business transformation, and he is the director of IMD's Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. I'm talking about Michael Wade. And after his pre-recorded keynote, he will join us for a live Q&A. So please remember, if you have any questions, please make sure to ask them in the Q&A tab in your Hopin app. So for now, enjoy this keynote with the title, Why Digital Transformation Usually Fails and What You Can Do About It. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vivian. Today, I'm going to talk about digital transformation. And what you hear a lot is all the positive things. And indeed, you can get great benefits from digital transformation. But I want to talk about the screw-ups. Why most digital transformations actually fail, not succeed, and what you, as procurement professionals, can do about it. So we did some research and we took all the data that we could find, so data that we had in the center that I run at IMD, but also other articles that have been written measuring the success rate of digital transformation. And the results shocked us, to be frank, because we calculated that 87% of these digital transformation initiatives actually failed to meet expectations. And so I want to talk about five factors that lead to this low level of success. All right, so let me go to the first one. Is this a reasonable goal? I want my organization to be more digital. And what we see is a lot of organizations are, rushing out there to improve their digital maturity or digital competence, but maybe not actually seeing organizational and business benefits from those investments. So the first mistake that we see leading to the low level of digital transformation success is focusing on the wrong objectives. Often digital for the sake of digital. So what should you be focusing on? Of course, you should be focusing on business objectives. So how does it work? I work at a business school which is in Switzerland, and in Switzerland we have a lot of cows. So we spend a lot of time thinking about cows, and we become kind of experts in cows. And one of the things we learned is that if you have a field full of cows like this, and you walk into that field, the cows are curious. They don't run away. They actually come closer. They move towards you. They're interested in whatever is coming into their field. And this is kind of when we first started looking at digital transformation seriously about 6 years ago. This is what we saw. Organizations were very interested. They were curious. They wanted to know more about the technologies and the digital disruptors and all that, but they weren't really sure about what to do. Now, more recently, that has changed, and particularly it has been accelerated by the pandemic. So now almost all organizations are doing all kinds of things. But if we look at the cow analogy again, it's almost like the cows have been spooked by all this stuff that's going on, and they've gotten scared, and so they start to run. So this is the case for many organizations today. It's not that they're not doing anything on digital, it's the opposite. They're doing everything. So they're playing around with all kinds of tools and technologies and artificial intelligence and augmented reality and blockchain, and they're working with startups and accelerators and all that. And they feel great because they're doing something. Something is better than nothing. But the danger is it becomes activity without purpose. It's just kind of digital for the sake of digital. And that links to the why you're doing it. So one of the questions that we regularly ask the executives we talk to is do you have a formal digital strategy? And this is data that I collected just a couple of weeks ago, and this is from the functions in a very big organization, including procurement. And so we asked them, do you have a formal digital strategy? Some of them said yes, some of them said no. But the most common answer by far was yes, but that digital strategy is fragmented. So that suggests in those organizations that the cows are running. And it matters because we also correlated that data with performance, both digital performance, so performance of their digital transformation, and also financial performance. And what we saw is that the organizations with the highest level of performance are the ones that had a coordinated digital strategy. No digital strategy was the worst, but fragmented digital strategy was somewhere in the middle. So there's a big benefit to making sure that you have a coordinated business objective linked to your digital transformation, and it's not just digital for the sake of digital. Number 2, so the second mistake that we see is setting up the digital team to fail. One of the most common executive roles of the last few years is a new one. It's the chief digital officer. Maybe in your organizations you have one of these. We've developed somewhat satirically the 5 stages of the CDO. So what are the 5 stages of the CDO? Stage 1 is they get hired. So usually from the outside, they come in with a great deal of knowledge, a great deal of experience around digital, and they're put into the role. They're given a responsibility to run the digital transformation of the company. So they get started, and the second D is the Chief Dazzling Officer, because without doubt, these guys and girls are great presenters, and they have good slides, and they talk about Uber, and they talk about the disruption of industries and how the world's going to change. And so everybody's excited about that. And they go around and they make these presentations, but then after a while, people stop listening as much because the chief digital officers, they got to go at some point from talking about transformation to actually doing it. But that's a lot harder because then you need to get the cooperation of the lines of business and the functions and everybody else. But they're all doing digital, as we see that the cows are running, so they don't necessarily need that much help. So the invites become a little bit less frequent, and the CDO becomes the chief disconnected officer. This continues for a while until we get to the 4th stage, which is the chief depressed officer, sometimes also the chief drinking officer. When they really get pushed to the edges of the organization, they're busy, they're talking to journalists, they're going to conferences, and they've got a few projects that they control, but mostly the rest of the organization has stopped listening. And then you have the 5th stage, which is the chief departed officer. And data that we've collected and looked at suggests that the tenure, the length of time a chief digital officer stays in his or her role is about 2.5 years, no more. And that number is actually getting shorter. And the vast majority of them, at the end of their tenure, they don't stay, they leave the company. So how do you set up the CDO to succeed? It's like procurement or any other area, they need to have real resources, right? So they're not just a small group stuck somewhere in head office, with a big ambition, but very little resources. They need to have people. They need to have money so that they can accelerate the digital initiatives that are happening in the other parts of the organization. They can provide money, they can provide digital technology skills, they can provide project management skills, and so forth. And that's really important. There's a nice quote here we have from one CDO: no one listens to a cost center. You've got to have financial means to be an attractive business partner. And that's also true for chief digital officers. All right, mistake number 3, managing digital in silos. This is very common that digital transformations are done within business lines or within functions. There's a digital transformation of procurement or finance or supply chain or marketing or whatever. And the problem there is that the impact of digital on performance is usually horizontal. So it's because of the amplifying effect of clever, effective management of data and technology that can impact positively multiple parts of the business. But that doesn't happen too much if it's done in silos. So one of the things we did when we looked at this was we tried to figure out, well, how do you do this? How can you run a digital transformation that's across, it's horizontal, it's across the organization, that impacts as many pieces of the puzzle as possible, including, of course, functions like procurement. And we created this model we call the Digital Transformation Orchestra, and it has 3 different sections. So there's the go-to-market section, which is around the products and services that you offer to the market. Are they the right ones? Do they need to be changed, updated, digitized? Channel, how you get those to your customer. Of course, there are traditional channels, retail, wholesale, or whatever, but there's also new channels, right? Apps, ecosystems, e-commerce, or whatever. And then there's the green section, engagements. How do you interact, communicate, and engage with key stakeholder groups, including the 3 main ones, your customers. And that, it's as relevant if it's a B2B or a B2C context, or even if your customer is internal. Maybe you're a function and your customer is internal. Employees, the people who work in your organization, can you engage with them more effectively? And finally, partners that you may have. And then the final section, the orange one over on the right there, is the organization itself, divided into 3 instruments. So the structure, how you organize in functions, lines of business, geographies, or whatever. Incentives, how people are rewarded and penalized. And then finally, the big one, mindset and culture. And we chose an orchestra, a metaphor, because when you go to listen to an orchestra, you don't just want to hear one instrument. And this is often the problem with digital. It's really focused around one thing. Maybe it's social media engagement with customers, or it's e-procurement, or whatever it is, and it's not linking enough with the other instruments. In an orchestra, you want to hear all the instruments, but you want to hear them working together, right? If they're all playing their own tunes, it sounds awful. So we've done lots and lots of analyses. We have mapped dozens and dozens of digital transformation journeys across the orchestra to see how organizations are coordinating all the different pieces together. All right. Quote here from a CDO of a bank in the Netherlands: working with digital is indeed a constant orchestration of capabilities, tooling, and not to forget, culture. And that leads to mistake number 4, not focusing enough on cultural transformation. When we're asked, what is the biggest barrier to digital transformation? Our answer is always the same. It is mindset. Mindset or culture can accelerate the digital transformation, or it can knock it dead. It can stop it in its tracks. And often digital transformation programs don't consider enough the cultural change elements. And maybe you recognize this in your organizations. Are you really ready as an organization to transform, to go through the changes and the steps necessary to transform? And in many cases, the answer is no, we're not. I think, again, the pandemic helped in this regard. It removed some barriers. But in some cases, it was also superficial. Take working from home. I suppose many of you are working from home at the moment. Is this digital transformation? Is it? Well, the answer is it depends. In many organizations, actually, the answer is no, it's not. They're just doing the same things you were doing in your office, and now you're doing in your home office. That's not transformation. That's digitization at best, but it's not transformation. But other organizations are taking the change in working habits to really think about how to change the culture of the organization. All right. How does this work? Can you change a culture? Yes, you can, because organizational cultures, they change all the time. Can you guide it? Yes, you can. But to guide it, you need to understand it. And so this is a slide taken from a deck from Axel Springer Group, which is a big media company that some of you may have heard of, German-based. And of course, you see a lot of digital disruption in media. And so they realized that they needed to change not only their operating model, but also their culture. And so they broke it down and they mapped it, on different scales. So perfection, speed, for example, they're very focused on perfection. You can't have a spelling mistake in an article. But they realized that if they wait too long, then opportunities are missed. So they wanted to focus more from perfection over to speed. Other elements that they define, and by the way, you can define the elements that are most relevant to your organization. This is what they did. Leading the team versus thinking in networks, hierarchy. They were very hierarchical. Everything kind of went up the chain down again. But they wanted to be more network based, so that you're getting your insights, you're getting your instructions from anywhere, either internally or outside the organization. Incremental thinking versus disruptive thinking, you could see there's another cultural element, and so on and so forth. So the point here is that there's ways to break down and think about your culture, measure it, benchmark it, and put in place programs to try and move it from where you are today to where you think you need to be. And that's also true for functions. Functions sometimes have a very traditional organization, right? Orientation and culture. All right, number 5, the last one, is they underinvest in digital capability building, right? They just assume people will figure it out, but typically they don't. And it's not just, and by the way, of course, I'm biased because I work for an organization that's, in the education space. But despite that, there's different types of roles, there's different types of knowledge in an organization. They typically fall into 3 categories when it comes to digital natives. They get it, they've grown up with it. It doesn't mean that they don't need to be trained, right? Because they understand the technology, but then maybe they don't understand the link with business objectives. So there's things that they need to know. Then there's the digital immigrants, people like me, and many of you, I suppose, that you're comfortable with technology, you use it, but it's not completely natural to you. You didn't grow up with it. It's not the first thing you think about. So, there's capability building for that group. And then there's a third group, the Luddites, the people who are not that interested in digital technologies. They're slow to adopt new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. And you need different types of capability building approaches for that group. So one size definitely doesn't fit all. In summary, there are 5 mistakes that organizations typically make when it comes to digital transformation. Mistake number 1, they focus on digital for the sake of digital. Number 2, setting up the digital team to fail. Mistake number 3, managing digital in silos rather than across the organization. Mistake number 4, not focusing enough on the cultural and mindset aspects of transformation. And then finally, mistake number 5, underinvesting in digital capability building. So my question to you, and you can think about this as you go through the conference and discuss this, and interact with peers, is has your organization made any of these mistakes? Or is it making them today? You're making 1 of them, 2 of them, all 5 of them. And most importantly, what can you do as procurement professionals? What can you do to help? All right, so there's food for thought for you. We will now move into the Q&A. Hopefully you have some questions or comments or observations that you want to share, and I'll be very happy to take those questions. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, how was that for an opening keynote, dear ladies and gentlemen? So many insights and so many lessons to share from Michael Wade. And he's joining me now live via call-in. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Vivian, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. And I think it's safe to say that our viewers absolutely loved it. I saw a lot of interaction going on. And I have a lot of questions, so let's just dive right into them, right?
Sure, let's do it.
Are you ready for the first question? Here it comes. Oh, actually, the first question is more of a general question. It's about, are we going to share the presentations with all of you, dear viewers? Well, this session, you can actually watch it back for a short period of time via video on demand, so you can see everything back. Some viewers might, some speakers might actually share their presentations, but we're still checking with all of the keynote speakers if that is fine. So please rewatch this via video on demand. So now the real first question then, it's a question from Susan Walsh, and the question is, Would you agree that data quality is a huge barrier to successful digital transformations?
And that's a great question from Susan. And before I answer it, let me just ensure, those of you who are watching and listening that I do actually own more than one shirt. Okay, it was the same shirt on the video, but that's just a coincidence. So to the question, it's yes, poor data quality can be a big barrier, and it's one of those that often gets overlooked or assumed away. And it's not just data quality, there's all kinds of things, sort of back office things that don't really ever get to the top of mind, of a lot of people making decisions. They just kind of assume the data is good quality. But it can be a massive a barrier actually to digital transformation. And what companies often do is they invest heavily in digital, but they prefer kind of the shiny, sexy new digital toys, right? Maybe an AI tool which has great capabilities, or augmented reality, or investing in blockchain, or whatever happens to be. And the data quality stuff, yeah, that'll sort itself out. But as many of you know, cleaning data is less like cleaning a house and more like heart surgery, right? So, when you have data in different databases, it's all dispersed. And this is a big problem. And the quality of the data, are we sure that the data we have is accurate? And often the answer is no. So yeah, it's not sexy, it's not cool to do, but I think time spent on basic core things like making sure that core infrastructure is harmonized and standardized and secure, and the data is of good quality, is usually time that's very well spent in a digital transformation.
Yeah, so it's really about the foundation, right? The foundation of everything is clean data.
Yes, it is. One thing we've learned from the pandemic, which is somewhat of a surprising learning, is that agility, and of course everyone talks about the importance of agility, and it is important, but agility on the edges of an organization, so interacting with customers and other stakeholders, normally requires stability in the center of an organization. So it's really important. The heroes of the pandemic weren't so much the people on the front lines. They weren't so much even, the digital technologies. They were kind of the back office folks, because they kept the things running, and allowed the organization to be innovative and agile on the edges. But unless you have that stable, secure, well-functioning, harmonized core, boy, I can tell you it's really hard to be agile.
Yeah. So on to our next question. It's from Fareed Siddiqui. And sorry, Fareed, I really hope that I pronounced your last name correctly. His question is, what is the pre-work needed before embarking on a digital transformation? So think of data, goals, priorities. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, well, you heard me tell the story about the cows, right? So often the instinct is let's go, right? Let's go. And into some respect, doing something is better than doing nothing. But if you just go for the sake of going on digital, after a while you have a cow problem. So one of the key things to do at the beginning is to really figure out, why are you doing this? What is your objective for the transformation? And please don't let it be to increase our digital maturity, right? Digital maturity only matters if it's taking you somewhere where you need to go in terms of performance. So, Fareed, you define performance, what it means for your organization. Is it top line growth? Is it efficiency? Is it market share? Is it NPS scores? Whatever it is, you define that clearly as you can, and then the digital transformation will become much more focused, right? And digital will really be an enabler of that objective that you set. Now, I'm not talking here about a 3-year or a 5-year plan, right? I guess many of you have those. They don't work. If you haven't figured it out already, they don't work. I mean, how many of you anticipated a global pandemic in your 5-year plan? I imagine very few of you. So
No.
nobody, right? No. Nobody did. So those kind of rigid plans, they just lock you in when you need to be a lot more agile. But it doesn't mean, and to get back to Fareed's question, which is a really important one, you still need the objective. You just don't need to know precisely how to get there.
Great, thanks. Another question from Alan Paul. Clarity of scope and alignment of parties, vendor and buyer. How often is the result, failure or success, directly related to overpromises from vendor, poor scope from client, and then scope creep?
Yeah, I mean, Alan, I think you're answering your question in the question. Those things are very common. I mentioned the statistic in the video, 87% of digital transformations fail. So the full sentence there is fail to meet objectives, right? And part of the problem often is the objectives are just set unrealistically high. Everybody has these mega high expectations about how these transformations are going to go. And, they do take time. They're not going to get it right the first time. So often you have unrealistic expectations, and then you have this issue of scope creep. And digital transformations in particular, often you're not doing them alone, you're doing them with a partner. And so you rely a lot on that partner. And one of the issues is that, many of the traditional partners in this space, they don't really understand it either. So they're struggling to figure out what to do. So you have a misalignment of understanding, of expectations, of goals there with a partner, and often you get this kind of scope creep and so forth that Alan talks about. So absolutely, overpromising from the vendor point of view, or poor scope from the client point of view, those are often at the core of the failure. The project actually might go okay, but because the expectations are set up so high, they're seen as being failures.
Well, Michael, I feel like we could talk for hours, and we do have a lot of questions coming in, so I would have loved to ask them all, but we can't because we have a packed program, and I think we need to go back to the rest of it. So thank you so much for being here, for joining us digitally today. I really loved it, and I think our viewers did as well. So thanks, and please feel free to enjoy the rest of DPW today. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Vivienne. It's been a great pleasure. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the event.
Thanks.